Hello, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. My name is Jared Carroll, and he, him pronouns, calling in from Oakland, California. I know this is largely Europe-based, so good to be here on the other side of the Atlantic. And this is, if you are not following along in your program, this is the panel that and I'm looking at my notes here, so if you see me looking up here, it's at my second screen. I'm not watching TV or looking out the window. So navigating fatherhood, challenging workplace stigma. So we've got, as you can see on the screen, 4 other folks besides me. And what we're going to do our best to have a conversation and really share stories, share perspectives, share insights. I've met almost everyone on this panel in our briefing, and I know there's lots of wisdom to share and lots of experiences between the 5 of us that hopefully all of you, as you're listening, will appreciate, will resonate with, and hopefully maybe even learn something. Right? So, Carlos, John, Craig, and Sanjay. In a moment, I'll have you each introduce yourself with just your name and your pronouns, your role, and your location, where you are in the world, and then the age of your children, because I think that's relevant to our conversation, right? So again, Jared Carroll, he, him. Up until a couple weeks ago, I was head of product at Translator Inc. doing DEI trainings. I just got laid off. But this show is not about me. But that said, if you know me, hey, reach out with any ideas you got for me. If you don't know me, by the end of this, if you think you might want to know me, reach out on LinkedIn and connect with me. I'm always up for any conversations, any exploring any opportunities that may come up. So as I said, I live in Oakland, California. It's bright and early, 6:37 a.m. Yes, I'm an early person. I didn't see much of the show before here because as much as I'm an early person, I'm not going to get up at 2:30 in the morning to watch the other panels. And I have 14-year-old twins. Actually, they'll be 15 in January. They're freshmen in high school, and you'll hear more stories about me and my kids and my fatherhood as we go along. So I'm just looking across my panel. I see Carlos first. So Carlos, why don't you introduce yourself?
Okay, thank you, Jared. So, hi everybody. My name is Carlos Jesus. My pronoun is he or him. I live in Lisbon, 48 years old, and father of 2 beautiful children, Catarina, which is 12, and Eduardo, which is 10. I work at Colt Technology Services. We are a global connectivity company. We provide telecommunication services, connectivity, and I'm based in, as I said, I'm based in Lisbon. I'm now the vice president for the global service delivery. So every service we deliver across the world, it goes through my team, and I'm really glad to be here. I hope to share, my thoughts and stimulate the conversation. And thank you for watching us.
Yeah, thanks, Carlos. Good to see you again, and welcome. John, good to have you here too. Tell us about yourself.
Thanks. I'm John Murphy, he, him. I have 2 little boys. They are 4 and 7, so I'm at the kind of out of the really difficult days, I hope. So don't tell me anything other than that, please. I know everyone's pulling faces now. I'm in London. I'm a little bit jealous of where you 2 are at the moment as we head into winter. And I work at the London Stock Exchange Group. I work in the HR team, so I work specifically with the ER teams, with the HR M&A teams, and looking forward to chatting.
Awesome. Good to see you again, John. Welcome. And yeah, and I would say that the weather's a little better in Oakland than London, but right now across the bay for me, President Biden and the Chinese folks and all kinds of people are there clogging up the city and the bridges and everything. So, but anyway, Craig, I'm just going clockwise around the horn here. Craig, welcome. Good to see you, and let's hear a little bit about yourself.
Thanks. Yeah, it's great to be here. Craig Donadio, he, him. I work at Goldman Sachs, based in London. I work in the global banking and markets division, and I have 3 children. I have an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 4-year-old. Olivia, Alex, and Elena. They're a handful, and yes, certainly like John, a bit out of the weeds from kind of the days of diapers and things of that nature. But certainly looking forward to this conversation and talking about fatherhood.
Awesome. Well, welcome, Craig. Good to have you here. And last but certainly not least, Sanjay, good to see you again. Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Thanks, Jared. Hi, I'm Sanjay Mistry, he, him. I live in Cambridge, so yeah, I'm like John, a little jealous of where you guys are because it's pretty miserable where I am. I've got two children, India age 11 and Ethan age 6. I work for the Wellcome Trust, which is a global health charity, and I work in the communications team.
Cool.
And I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Well, welcome. Well, it sounds like I have the oldest kids. I'll just say, if I remember everyone's ages right, no teenagers yet. Yeah. So,
Not yet, yes.
so good luck. Good luck. I mean, I don't know. Diapers, attitudes, you know, I guess I'd probably take attitudes a little bit because they just kind of go off and do their own thing. But, you know, it's a different stage of parenting, shall we say. But seriously, good to have you all here. Let's dive in. So I have just a couple questions that we're going to start with. But really, I want this to be a conversation. Anyone can add in a different perspective, a story. We really want to humanize ourselves, each other, and our children as much as it makes sense. So, Carlos, I want to start with you and just how are men, or how are you specifically, balancing fatherhood with workplace demands and expectations? So, take us a little bit into your world, you know, Carlos Jesus's world as a father. As you know, with a big role, I assume a lot of responsibility, a lot of demands. What's that like for you, kind of on a daily basis?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's a tough one. I would say better today than I was in the past. And the pandemic taught us a lot. What is the art of the possible? But you know, I have to reflect in coming back. Historically, it was not easy. You know, there is always an expectation from us that we are always available, we are focused on the work, we are committed, long hours, and almost zero or minimum responsibilities outside of the job. You know, kind of the expectation that was created, and that's my past. And I remember these days where, honestly, I remember these days where, you know, getting to the office a little bit late, while because I had to take my, you know, some of my children to school, or I had to go and speak with the teacher, or something. You know, getting to the office late or having to leave the office earlier, it was always with that sentiment of guilt and shame. You know, like the people, the eyes, the people looking around and saying, oh, you know, he's arriving a little bit more late, or he's arriving earlier, etc. And there was this stigma of just opening and speaking about it, you know, what happened. And so, but as I said, you know, fast forward a few years with the pandemic, you know, being that taught us the art of the possible, taught us about that we can do much more flexible working, flexible hours. It taught us about the importance of the increased work-life balance. I think we are in a different stage right now. I'm personally in a different stage, and to be honest, with the challenges in my role, where you know, like waking up sometimes to speak with the Asia team, it needs to be really early in the morning, or no, we need to speak with the other teams that are US based, that are a little bit later in the day. You know, always challenging hours, but without this flexibility wasn't possible. The flexibility we have today.
Yeah.
And you know, so that's an important thing. And I think that's why important organizations, you know, that they evolve and think this work-life balance, you know. And today, honestly, I do not feel that shame. It's easy for me to stay at home if my daughter is sick, and to show and tell, like, look, yeah, I stay at home today because my daughter is sick. I'm taking care. You know, she's here, and there is no more stigma as much of that. But I'm privileged. I know it's not always the same everywhere, but that's why it's important for us to talk about it, to make it normal, to make it, you know, to help others to this journey.
Totally. Wow. So much good insights, Carlos. I wrote a couple notes, a phrase I hadn't heard until you said it, the art of the possible. I love that. I mean, you can see my background. I got books, I got records, right? If you could see over here, I've got guitars and all kinds of stuff. I mean, my family is very, you know, artsy, you know, right? My son's a piano player. My daughter does ballet. the whole thing. So that, I think of art, and I love that combination of the art of the possible. And I'd love to bring, anyone else in, building on what John said, or I'm sorry, what Carlos said, right? This like sense of guilt, shame. It sounds like you've moved through that, which is awesome, right? So like kind of a personal evolution. Where's everyone else feeling on that kind of like that guilt, shame? It sounds like, Carlos, remind me, your kids are a little bit older now, right? So
yeah, 10 and 12. Yes.
So 10 and 12, right? So you've kind of had, 12 years of experience of being a father. Maybe, John, your kids are a little bit younger, or anyone else. What that's like for you? Do you still feel maybe a little bit of guilt, shame, or are you moving through it, or you're like, screw that, I'm not going to even play that role? Like, tell me a little bit about your work.
Definitely, I recognize that totally in the learning curve bit as well. I think when we look at, we're going through this sort of big societal change, aren't we? That more and more fathers are kind of playing an active role, and frankly, one of the big reasons for that is an economic one, isn't it? That more and more families have two working parents, and it needs to change in terms of the balance. So my partner works. We both have careers that we value, and we work really hard to get that to be a kind of an equal balance and a 50-50 balance. Like, if she was sitting here, I think she'd tell you that I pulled a very light shift in pregnancy and the whole birth part of it. So I'm still a bit in the red. But like from that point onwards, we've tried our best. But when I look back at the early days, there's times that I prioritized work, or I put that first, and either because I thought it was more important, or I thought that was what people expected me to do. And now when I reflect on it, like, I missed out because of that. And I think honestly, most of that was in my head. I don't think it was really what the people I was working with were thinking. I think that was just the expectations for me. And, I work in HR, so I'm probably on the lighter side of things from this perspective. But a lot of that was just the pressure that was in my head. And I have regrets about that. And I think I've got better, and I'm much better at kind of prioritizing now. I'm much better at saying what I need. But I keep those little regrets in the back of my head to remind me of what I'm pushing for. And like Carlos said, I'm in a super privileged position now. I can block the time in my calendar when I need to do stuff. I have absolutely no qualms telling my boss when I need to go and pick the kids up. And I feel a real sort of sense of duty to pay that forwards and, tell that story and help the people coming into this at the start again, and just remind people that I'm not actually making a judgment if you go home early to pick up your kids. I don't think anybody else, like I'm sort of gesturing at the office, which is out there, is doing so. But the sense of guilt is really strong because it's a huge change.
Yeah. John, I mean, two things you said that I think are huge, and I'd love to get Sanjay's and Craig's, thoughts, stories, perspectives on this. Most of the expectations and pressure was in your head. I wonder, I have a sense, and not just on this men's panel with the four of you, but just in general, when I talk to, when I have talked to people, friends, neighbors, colleagues, a lot of that is we bring it on ourselves. And I know, each one of you is in a leadership role. So in a way, it's like, yes, there's that expectation because you're kind of more senior in the company, but then also it's like, and you get to kind of normalize what's okay. So it sounds like both you and Carlos have done that. Craig, I wonder, from your perspective, you're, executive director. I can imagine what that means, right? A lot of responsibility, a lot of visibility. People see you, people know you, people, are kind of watching you. How does, that what John was saying around kind of expectations, pressure, how do you kind of, I don't know, see that in your role, or how's that evolved, as your kids have gotten older?
Yeah, I mean, I joined Goldman Sachs. I've been there for about 5 years. I was a lateral hire, and I can tell you, right, it has a reputation of being, it's an intense place. It's a great place, but I really thought, I came in and I had 2 kids already, and I thought, oof. And I was very good at my previous job. I kind of was leaving at 5:30, picking kids up, dropping them off at school. So it was a good situation. I thought, okay, I'm going to go join Goldman Sachs, and oh man, what am I going to do? What are they going to think? I need to still do this. My wife works too. She's quite successful with her job, and I still need to support her and the kids. And I just thought, I put a lot of pressure on myself. Oh my God, what are they going to think of me? And And really, it's been a fantastic journey. I think support from managers, which I'm sure we can talk more about, was always there for me. I've worked with plenty of people who had kids and respected the things that I needed to do to be there for them. I think it was also crucial in terms of the communication up front of what I needed. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'll be coming in a bit later. I'll be leaving a bit earlier because I need to do pickup. So they knew what was going on and what was happening. And then, of course, as kind of Carlos talked about, was the flexibility of I need to work from home. Right. Kids are sick. I think in my first month of being at Goldman Sachs, my daughter was in the hospital for 2 days, and our son was, quite young. And so here I was kind of 2 weeks in going, really sorry, I can't come in today. And obviously she was just sick and we had to be in the hospital and I had to stay there. But of course, in my mind, I'm going, oh no, that's it. I'm like, I'm not working. What am I going to do? I'm the new guy. But obviously they were super supportive, continue to be. And so, I think you're right. We kind of put the pressure on ourselves. And I think, to the extent that our product and our work speaks for itself, right? And then the flexibility is super helpful. So it's not an easy thing to work through.
Totally. And I love what you said, like communicate what I need. Without, you don't have to be arrogant, you don't have to be cocky, you don't have to be demanding, you don't have to be, argumentative. It's just like, hey, here's my situation. And, you mentioned something which we're going to get to in a minute, but I want to hear from Sanjay first. This is like, what do organizations do to support people, especially managers, especially leaders? We'll get to that in a second, which is, of course, a very instrumental part of this equation. But Sanjay, I want to bring you in. John mentioned kind of regrets about missing things when his kids were younger. I mean, they're still young. And now he kind of uses that as motivation. Like, wait a second. Okay, I did some of this. I wish I hadn't. I'm not going to beat myself up over it. I'm just going to change. I'm going to do it differently now. Kind of, I'm thinking, John, kind of like a little more confidence in like who you are, what, how you can normalize, what the expectations are, not only for yourself, but for your team. Share with us a little bit about your experience of kind of moving through, I don't know, in your head, how things have changed for you as you've gotten, been a father for longer and your kids are older and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. I kind of echo everything that everyone said so far, but I think for me, earlier in my career, everything before you have children, you're focused on your career, on your partner, and that's kind of your focus. And then you have children, and then there are other responsibilities that are suddenly there with you that you have, and it's that thing in your brain, like I now have to kind of make a choice in some respects of what I need to do and when. And I've had previous employers that weren't as, let's say, flexible as my last couple of employers. So that presenteeism was always a thing for me, and partly it was in my head, but partly it was having managers and other senior leaders kind of saying, we noticed, and I've had managers before kind of like, we kind of noticed you left it at 10 to 5 yesterday. And it's those kind of conversations, and that adds to probably the guilt in your head, but also the stigma, and also that they are watching me, or they are kind of clocking when I'm coming in and coming out. And from that experience, I kind of took a bit out of Craig's book around kind of having that communication with my organizations when I started work, and kind of saying, well, I do have other responsibilities. My wife works, she's successful in her career too. And just being open and honest around what flexibility I might need, when I might need it. And I think for a number of organizations since the pandemic, as Carlos said earlier, they've had to go through a shift themselves. So presenteeism is now not necessarily a thing that organizations are really thinking about. What they are thinking about is actually, how do we get the best out of our people? And I think some of the more progressive organizations are trying to see, well, if we can make them if we can make roles and stuff more flexible for our employees, then we're going to get the best out of them. For me personally, I do a 9-day fortnight, and my employees are happy with that. It's great. I get every other Monday to myself, but that also allows me to do other things. And then and also now my team know that between 4 and 6, I am going to be doing some work, but I've got either a school run to do, or reading with my children, or giving them food and stuff, and they're fine with that. If I need to pick up work afterwards, I'll do that, but that's off my own back, not because my organisation are expecting me to do that. It's because I want to do it, because I need to do it, but because I've been given that flexibility and that acknowledgement that we care about your personal life as well as your work life. I'm more inclined to think, well, I need to give a bit more too, and catch up on work and other things. So that's kind of where it's been for me.
Yeah, no, so many good insights, Sanjay. And I think you spoke to, and I'm writing some notes down here. That when managers, or really anyone who, and usually they're more, at least at your level, or more senior, when even if they're just joking, or they kind of like these little snide, kind of snarky comments, oh, I noticed you came in 10 minutes late. Oh, like it builds up. It adds up, and depending on your relationship with that person, and what the power dynamics are, there's so many factors and variables to it, but it can get in your head, and it does, as you said, because as you implied, like, it adds to the guilt, to the stigma. And actually, I think that's a good segue into this next kind of question that I'd love to hear your experience. And I want to ask John first. What do organizations, or organizations as a whole, or even on like the team level, right, or department level, depending on how big your organization is, right? What do they need to do better? And maybe what are they doing, or what is your organization doing, or in your experience, to support men as fathers with some of these dynamics that all of you just shared, right? Around the balance, around responsibilities, around partnership with a partner at home, and trying to be equitable in that regard. What are organizations doing, John, and what could they be doing better, from your perspective?
So I'm going to take that as a kind of organizational level, because that's what I spend my days thinking about. And I think the first thing you need to think about is, like, particularly for anyone sort of thinking about how to get their own organization there, you've got to be able to describe what the benefit for the businesses of this. And I think, as we've described, there is a societal shift over time. More and more men are wanting, it's like when everybody was working from home a little bit in COVID, you get a taste for it and you don't want to give it up. So people are seeing the benefits of this, and to tap into that talent market, you need to be able to create a workplace where this is okay and you can support fathers. On the other side of it, organizations are doing a huge amount to try and support women in the workplace, and to support that gain, you need somebody else. You need a more equal approach to parenthood, and that's something which businesses need to be able to pay attention to in order to drive these changes.
Yeah,
I think when you get to the kind of solution side, broadly, I see two parts to it. So there's an infrastructure part around how do you create kind of policies and practices to support all parents. I was at Burberry until the summer. We rewrote all our leave policies to provide equal benefits to all parents. Throughout globally, everybody got the same amount. And these early stages and the habits that you build are super important for long-term changes. But it doesn't end there. So you need to look at, do your flexible working policies all apply equally to both genders, to people adopting, to step parents, to all of those kinds of things. We've just launched the LSEG carers leave to allow people time off for sort of unexpected changes to their caring relationships. And it's really important to make sure that those are visibly and openly, very explicitly open to all, because people will make assumptions about what they're aimed at, and you need to be able to challenge those. And they're important both for people using the policies, but also for everybody else, that you're sending a very visible signal as an organization that this is what we think is the right thing to do, is to support all parents through this.
Yeah. Well,
go on.
Oh, I was gonna say, I love the idea of it's like codifying it, right? Yeah. And not only codifying, because frankly, like policy, here's the employee handbook, like snooze, right? Like no one wants to read that stuff,
I wrote
right?
a great one. You should check it out.
Okay, well, yeah, I'll read it in my in my spare time. No, but seriously, right? But we don't think. I mean, I don't. Maybe if you're in HR, if you're writing policies, you think about it. But sometimes we think of those as just like, yeah, whatever. Like, yeah, okay, flip through it, sign it, and you go. But they really have value especially if, as you kind of alluded to, like, or Sanjay alluded to too, right? Like if it's progressive and really thinking about it, normal, putting it into codified, and then talking about it openly and saying, hey, this is how we want you all to think and behave and treat each other, and the expectations, like, hey, we trust you. We know we hired you because you kick ass and you're going to do your job well. Like, we want you to do that, and we also get it. And so just that thing, I think, goes a long way in lessening the stigma, that Sanjay was talking about. Any other kind of, what are others seeing at their organizations, or maybe in past organizations, that are similar to what John's doing? Because it sounds like that's a good thing that's moving forward in your organization. But anyone else have a different experience or a different perspective on that? Yeah, Craig, I see. Are you about to?
Yeah,
you want to
I can say. I actually funny that when I had my third child, and I was at Goldman Sachs, she was born in October. And I think 2 weeks before she was born, they changed the policy for parental leave for non-birthing parents to have something like 26 weeks in the UK, to have it the same. And but the due date was November 1st, and I was there to HR going, wait, I'm only a month away from this policy. Am I not subject to it? And this and that. And but obviously those types of things are crucial in order to move the needle, right, from a support perspective. And I think kind of the opposite, another kind of function is also going back to the managerial report is kind of the support and encouragement of those policies, for folks in leadership to pass that down and really encourage people to utilize them, and kind of, as John said, reduce the stigma that is associated with maybe taking leave. And I have a colleague now who's had his fourth child, and I just ran up to him and was like, you're going to take the 26, like, you're going to do this, right? Do it for me, if anything. But right, it has to be that open conversation of, right, this is here for you. Please take it, do what's best for you. Right. And so it's definitely the policy for sure. But again, that support from leadership about you actually utilizing it.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up a good point. And Carlos, I'll bring you in just a second. It's almost like we had the people who are in charge of making these decisions had to flip the script. Instead of it being like, we expect you to come in and you can't be 10 minutes late because you have a job and you've been contracted to be 9 to 5. Like, it has to flip, not to say like it's okay. It's like, no, we want you to take advantage of this policy. We expect you to, maybe even go as far as like, we demand that you take it, right? So it's like it has to flip that the rhetoric and the way that people are talking about it, from the kind of the snide little jokes that Sanjay was mentioning, right? It has to flip to like, hey, if you don't get out of here and go get your kid from soccer practice, you're gonna be fired. Like, ha ha ha. Like, whatever it is, like, it needs to flip, so then we really do kind of have that true, deep, genuine sense, like, okay, this is not only okay, but this is expected. So yeah, Carlos, I think you wanted to come in. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to reinforce, because I think that's super important. Policies and what comes from the company, the leadership, is very important because it gives signals. But the behaviors, the day-to-day behaviors of managers is quite important, that they are behind it. It's totally okay. We need to normalize this conversation. We need to humanize this conversation. Like, we need to be open and vocal about it without being in that will create a company culture as well. That will help facilitating. If all of us that are in more senior positions, if our teams across to all levels, they see us behaving this way. Some days I'm in the office, some days I'm here, some days, many times they ask, Carlos, what is about this stormtrooper here? And I keep saying, well, that's not mine. That's for my son. When I got COVID, I was in quarantine. I was supposed to be in quarantine here. The law in Portugal say you have to quarantine for a week. And my son went and put it there and said, Daddy, that's for you to be here with you, and you remind about me. Guess what? He didn't took it anymore because I didn't allow. Because when I'm having these tough conversations, I see the stormtrooper there, and I remind me and brings me to a good situation. But I'm vocal about it. I share it. We need to normalize, humanize this, and that will help cascading the policies, the procedures, the throughout the organization. If we are in a fishbowl and people look, don't just look what I say, look what I do. and that's quite important. I was just wanted to emphasize that.
Yeah, totally. And Sanjay, I want to bring you in, but there's a couple comments that came in from some of the delegates, and there's actually a question which I want to pose to all of you in a second as well. But first, from Jane Finch, really important point about being overt, that policies are aimed at everybody, not just moms, right? So it's like, understanding that, parents come in all genders, and parental responsibility and desire, frankly, right? Like, we want to be good parents. Not like, oh, I have to go home and take care of my kids. Like, no, we want to hang out with them, right? So that's a really good comment from Jane. And then Melanie Wolfenden says, there's a cost to the business to have the policies, and smaller companies struggle to flip this, right? Like, as we were talking about, kind of flipping the mindset. Even if it's the right thing to do, I think it's important for businesses to be flexible for everyone, right? So talk about, motivation and what motivates. Like, if it's like this just becomes a drag to go into work, and then you're feeling guilty, you can't, and you're missing time from your kids and stuff, like, you're not going to do your best work, right? Sanjay, I'd love to bring you in, and if you feel like trying to address this question, and this can also be open to anyone on the panel, from a delegate that Dylan put in our chat here. For those of having to have conversations with their managers, how does anyone on the panel suggest we approach that dialogue? So, we've been talking about leadership, and, Carlos, you said, like, kind of the difference between policies and then actually behaviors. Like, one thing to put policies, but then are the behaviors of leaders actually, I don't want to say enforcing, but supporting it and normalizing it. Sanjay, any thoughts on that? How to have dialogues with your manager, if maybe they're not normalizing how you would, how we would like them to and expect them to.
No, I think if you're starting a new role, I think it's important to have an open, honest conversation at the start. Kind of your expectations, their expectations of your role, what they expect from you, and in that you can bring up a conversation around, well, actually, I have childcare issues or responsibilities, and I'm going to need some flexibility. What is there? But also understanding, I think, John touched on it earlier, but understanding their policies and procedures. If they've codified flexible leave, if they've codified parental leave or other things, then there are mechanisms there for you to use it too. So you can approach the conversation through those channels as well, if you don't feel comfortable with just having a conversation. I think there are those kind of things. And I think on some of the other things earlier that we were talking about, I think having better, if you like, policies that are more flexible for parents is really important. And from an employer brand perspective, we now know, a number of potential employees are looking at their employer brand. They're looking at companies they want to work for that reflect their views on society, on the way they work and what they do. So companies are having to maybe come to the party a little late, but having to reflect that. Otherwise, they risk being kept in part and not getting the best people. So there is a kind of a push and pull, or, it's not just all about, having the best things for everyone. I think companies have realized, or the organizations are starting to realize, that if they want the best people, society has changed, as kind of John said earlier, but they need to start reflecting those changes. In my team, I've got a variety of ages, a variety of diversities within my whole team. Some take flexible leave, some have children, but I mirror what I want my team to do. So they know I do a 9-day fortnight. They know I'm not always accessible after 5 o'clock for an hour or so, and I completely appreciate that there are times that they won't do. So one of my team has caring responsibilities for elderly grandparents. We've had that conversation. I know at times they're not always going to be around because they've got to do those caring issues, and I think that's absolutely fine too. But as senior leaders, as Carlos said, we need to kind of mirror some of the stuff that we want other teams to do. We've had senior managers maybe not necessarily reflect the way we want it to, and we've had to change those, and maybe we're that kind of era where we are in that change process. But we, as leaders, we want our teams to mirror what we do, so then they'll bring the same through to them.
Yeah. I mean, and I'll just so many good insights there, Sanjay. And just to answer, another kind of maybe even talking points for that comment around how do you have conversations with managers. I know I've been in situations, not recently, I've been pretty fortunate in the last 6, 7, 8 years of my career that this hasn't been an issue. But when my kids were younger and I had a different job, I just go up and say, hey, I've got to get home at such and such time to get my kids to preschool. What can we do about that? Because I know that my work is important to me and to us, but also I need to do this. Like, can we work this out? So kind of coming in with like, not like I need this, and if you don't, not defensive. And it depends, of course, on the person and their personality and your relationship and the power dynamic. There's so many factors, but I think we can come in with just, as someone said earlier, I think it was Craig said earlier, like, here's what I need. Here's what I need to happen. And how can you support me in that? And I think most people, if they say, well, say, sorry, John, you know what? The policy says you have to stay till 3, so you can't leave at 2:15. Well, maybe it's time to get another job, frankly, right? Like if it's just that rigid, it's time to move on. So I really believe, and this goes back to some of what, we were saying at the top, like John said, and I think a couple other people said around like this pressure that we put on ourselves and this kind of fear of the unknown. Well, hey, I really need this, but I don't know what they're going to say if I ask for it. And that's just normal human behavior, right? Human psychology, right? But if we go in with the confidence, like, here's what I need. Can we work on this? Can we work out something that works for all of us? I think that's really powerful. I want to bring in something a little off script here. I've just been thinking about it as I've been hearing all your stories and your responses to the questions. This concept, we've been talking about, hey, work is important, but so are the kids. Are there times when actually, let's not forget, I hope all of us like our jobs. Like, it's not just a drudgery that we're going through and it's like, oh, this work. Like, we actually are there times when it's not a case of like, it's like, what, actually, I do want to, do this. I do want to give this presentation. I do want to be in this meeting because it's important, not just for the sake of like, blah, but like actually, we get pleasure, we get motivated, we get inspired by doing our jobs. I hope, maybe not all the time, but a lot of the time. So are there any instances where it's like, it's not a case of stigma, it's not a case of, of expectations, it's a case of like, you know what, I want to do this and I'm going to sacrifice, I'm going to make other arrangements for kid pickup or for something like that. Are there any stories any of you have around that? Because I think that's a dynamic we haven't really kind of touched on yet. John, I see you kind of smiling a little bit. Go ahead.
So a lesson I learned from a friend of, we did the kind of, the NCT, it's like a UK, it's sort of a way for people to having babies to make friends really, but it's a kind of pre-birth course. And so Rianne, she's called, I learned from her when her kid, because when your kid's like, why are you going? Why do you have to go? And she would always be like, because mummy really enjoys work and like gets a lot out of it, and it's very, it's valuable and it's important to us. And I think I've always tried to do that with my kids in the kind of, when they're, why do you have to go and do this? So if you have to travel somewhere, if you have to miss something, you're like, because actually I really enjoy what I do. I get a lot out of it. I get to spend my days thinking about stuff which hopefully makes work better for people. And that's a really important thing. And sometimes we have to make kind of compromises along those lines. And I think you do, like, there are, like I said, I have things that I got wrong. And there are things that I definitely don't regret and that I've been able to do. But I think that's a super positive message to be able to give, to give your kids about how you balance things up, and how I do, I love them a lot. I'd love to spend more time with them, but actually it probably makes me a better parent to also have all of this over in the side. And that sort of role modeling is really important. When I was asked to do this, so today's my dad's birthday. It's 75th birthday today. And that, like, I was super lucky that I had someone who was, a really involved parent, and that role modeling is really important. So yeah, I definitely hear that, and I think you've just got to head into it.
Yeah, I love, as Carlos said earlier, like the humanization of of all this, right? And it's one thing you say, like, hey Jimmy, I can't come to your baseball game. I've got to send some emails. Like, okay, maybe that's the wrong decision, but it's like, hey, you know what? I have to travel because I have to make a really important presentation and I'm really looking forward to it. And I get to meet so and so and so. It's going to be really good for, you know, and you explain that to your kids. So, hey, I won't be there, you know, Friday, but next week I'll, right. So, you know, you make those decisions. Hopefully, you know, they're reasoned and they're, you know, you know, you've factored in kind of you've weighted things.
Balanced,
right. So any other stories? And because I'm mindful we have about 20 minutes and there's one kind of other big topic that I want us to get to, but spend a few minutes here. Any other stories similar to John's?
I was just going to say, Jared, I kind of have a couple of non-exec roles that I do too, which obviously takes me out of my work time. So, you know, there are periods of time where that takes me away, or tonight I've got a meeting from 7 till 9 in the evening, which means I won't, you know, put the kids to bed and whatever else. But what I do is, a bit like John, you have that conversation, and my children are slightly older, 11 and 6, so they kind of understand that I have to do other things. It's not just all of them, you know, but, you know, there are certain periods of the week, generally it's a Saturday, where it is just dedicated to them. So the phone is off. You know, my son plays football. I coach his football team. My daughter does dance. But those are non-negotiable, and the kids know that's a non-negotiable time with me. That's fine. We do that. But there are, you know, as much as there are split responsibilities, for me, my career is also very important. You know, I want to get where I can in my career and move on up, or wherever I want to go. So as a parent, you have to make some choices that sometimes, you know, you might feel a little bit guilty about, but you kind of have to do that. And in the role I do, it's been throughout my career, in communications, things can just happen, which means you have to pivot really quickly, you know. And so there's a phone call to my wife going, yeah, I can't do pickup tonight because something's just kicked off and you're going to have to do it. And she can do that at times. Sometimes she can't, and we have to go find a neighbor or someone. But there are those opportunities, you know, there are those things. And I think that's absolutely fine. I think what's really probably a point I want to get across is kind of don't feel guilty about it. You know, as much as we've talked about, you know, wanting to spend time with our children, having flexible roles, being leaders who kind of can mirror some of the stuff that we want to do it. But at times work will have to take a precedence in certain aspects, and don't feel guilty about it.
Yeah.
You know, you have to do that.
Totally. And what Craig said earlier about communicating what you know, what I need, you know, you were talking in the context of to your manager, but that you can also to your partner, to your kids. Hey, I know I usually pick you up on Wednesdays, but, you know, this week I got to do this and mom's going to pick you up or the neighbor's going to pick you up. Like, you know, we'll try and get back on schedule next week. Like that's just like relationship building, whether it's with a manager, a partner, with your kids, right? So having those transparent conversations. And then I can say as your kids get older, I mean, my kids are in high school, like they understand, you know, that we work, right? And there are logistical things and sometimes there are changes. And it's, for the most part, it's not a big deal if there's a change or something on any given day, because like stuff happens, right? So yeah. Craig or Carlos, any thoughts, stories?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think I actually revel in the chaos of maybe what Sanjay said, where you got so much stuff going on, it almost kind of like focuses your mind, and so it's work, and I have to run home to do this, to pick up the kids, but I had to jump on a call, or you know, suddenly my wife calls to say, oh, I have to go to drinks for a client thing, like, oh my god, I need to scramble. And I think really the important thing that you mentioned, Jared, and the word sacrifice is it takes sacrifice, both on my part or my wife's part, for that matter, of, you know, what are you giving up? And if I think about kind of John's point around father, and, you know, having someone to role model, I feel like my father worked in the financial industry, and he woke up like super early to go to work, came back a bit late, and it was very much more of, you know, my mom was around, and obviously on the weekends we spent time with him. And so it's like, oh, how can I change the narrative? And I live in a major city now in London. I work, and it's easy to get to work. So, but at the same time, I sacrifice, right? I log in at night to make up, right? To do more stuff. And so the time of when I pick up my kids, I'm with them. That's it. Like it's us, it's them. And then they go to sleep, read them stories, and then it's back on, because that's the choice that I made. And I'm happy with that. But we all have those choices to make. But yeah, I think it is definitely the chaos of running around. That I find it almost, it's really challenging, and I don't stop to think about it too much because it's like, how do you do it? But I think it's getting through that I think makes it a little bit easier.
Well, and you bring in, because I'm kind of the opposite. Like I don't revel in. I mean, I can handle it, but I'm trying, and sometimes I over like manage it or over try and script it. But I try and like, all right, here's what I'm going to do, and here's what I'm not going to do. And then, for the most part, it's pretty successful. But then when stuff happens, it's like, oh wait, now I got to change my stoicism here, right? So yeah, totally. Carlos, yeah, any thoughts on that? And then I want to kind of take us to this last kind of topic before we start to wrap up in the next 10 minutes or so.
No, I think again part of that humanization, and mostly for the audience here. Like, look, yes, many times we had that important meeting and we had that important travel that take us away from the family, and it happens. So it happens, and we had to choose that. It doesn't in any chance make us the family less important. My family is the most important thing to me. But to everything that was said, Craig, Sanjay, John, having that conversation with the family, having that conversation with the kids, they are in that age minds that they ask the why, and they don't settle for just an easy answer. They ask why. It's trying to bring them, explain, like, look, yeah, it's like this. But then many of you said, when we are together, we are together, and I think that's very, very important. Yes, many times we have to struggle and juggle with the complexities of managing work and family. But yeah, it's talk. Even in work, I feel like that, right? So most of the conflicts and issues is why, because we are not talking enough. We are not talking enough, being open enough, transparent enough, discussing the issues that we have, the problems we have. And many times at work, I feel I'm talking with my children, right? Which is, but conversation, talking about things. I think it's how we sort out the majority of the problems.
Yeah, I love it. And, I think you're absolutely right. Like, and this goes back to so many of the different kind of anecdotes and comments that you all have made. Like, communicate like what's going on, what we need, what the situation is, what are the needs of the different parties, whether it's managers and employees or kids and parents or partners, et cetera. Just communications, which actually takes us to this last kind of question and topic. How are fathers coming together to confront prejudice? And I want to just kind of add my perspective as a jumping off point. We've been talking about, which makes sense because this is the panel and this is the day around, how do we as fathers, get the respect, get the balance, get the, ask for what we want, remove the stigma, all those things are true and valid and needed. And some of you, I think, mentioned this earlier, as men, we have privilege, right? And I know as a white man, I have even more privilege. As a white straight man, I have even more privilege. As a white cis straight man, et cetera, right? So, yes, we want to look out for, for our own, and remove the stigmas of being a father and all the things we've talked about in the last, 45 minutes or so. And I know, and I think, and I hope all of us know that prejudice in the workplace goes well beyond just prejudice against fathers, right? And in fact, historically, and still contemporarily, it's still much worse for women, for Black women, for Black queer women, for people with disabilities, for all kinds of things, right? I know the company where, as I mentioned at the top, I just left, but it was a small startup, and the CEO is a trans woman, and she's awesome, and she's really good at sales and getting deals and stuff. But she knows, and she shares it with us, like, because she's a trans woman, it's hard to get funding, because when she was working in organizations as a man, and then before she transitioned, she notices the difference of how she's treated. So lots of stories we could tell, but I'd love to just hear any takes on what any of you are doing personally, and or what your organizations are doing, or what you've seen doing well to confront prejudice in the organization. Anyone want to kind of share any stories, examples, ideas?
I think from my side, and I think I answer in a slightly reverse scenario is, I've actually tried joining kind of we have many affiliate networks, and trying to get involved in those, and currently joined one as a women's inspiration network. And I can tell you, when I first went in, I was super nervous because I opened the door and saw, like kind of like 20 women, and I kind of shut it and was like, oh my God, am I really going to go into this meeting? I'm a man. Like, what are they going to, but they kind of, were welcoming me as like, yes, like, tell us your story. How can we help? And really, I think it's about that sharing and bringing our kind of authentic self to work, and having empathy for each other to hear it out and let people be themselves, because we all have something to contribute. And I think that's right. It's kind of a change in mindset that will help shift the dial to for these things to kind of grow and take flight. And so, just a little bit something from my side is how I kind of see it.
Yeah, I love it, Craig. And you talked about, you didn't say it, but I heard like, being the only, right? I am very rarely the only man, the only white person in a group. But sometimes I am. And most of the times it's because I put myself very intentionally in that situation for whatever reason, social or professional, and being able to sit with that. And, you brought up kind of empathy, like, oh, wow. I wonder if this is what it's like to be the only, Black person on the team, the only woman in leadership, the only, right? And just kind of having that perspective. And I would argue that everything we've been talking about, telling our story, being vulnerable, being, modeling the behaviors, as you said, Carlos, like humanizing ourselves, that is all, or is and should be working towards, humanizing others from a diversity perspective. John, I see you came off mute. Do you want to share something?
Well, I think a lot of what we've been talking about is there is a selfish element to it, and that this is stuff that we want to do and we enjoy. There is also an element though where I'm in a super privileged position, and part of this is that historically it is people in less privileged groups who've ended up doing all the childcare. And that is contributed to all of those things and things like that. And I think all of the work on an organizational level about rebalancing that is about rebalancing the positions that people are in when they're coming into the workforce. So it's a joy for us to be able to be involved in this kind of thing, but it is also correcting things which would have created disadvantage for groups historically forever. And I think it's really important, like the point that somebody made in one of the questions about small businesses and the cost. And yeah, this is a huge cost if you want to do this in some ways. There's a lot of benefits in terms of the long-term gains of, the talent pools and things like that. It's also about if you can't do leaves, then you do something else and like pick the bits that you can do. My hope, and maybe I am a little naive in this, but like when my kids have kids, everyone will be doing that, and they'll look back at the period where just the birth mother had leave, and they'll be like, wow, that was weird, wasn't it? Because
I hope you're right. I hope you're right, John.
Yeah, in the same way that when I first came into the workforce, people still had contracts saying they had to resign when they got married and things like that. It's albeit from a while ago, but these things are changing, and I do think as part of that changing, it is also allowing it allows a rebalancing, and that's a lot of what this is about, is creating more equality in what we're doing.
Yeah, I love it. Sanjay, I see you come off mute. Did you want to share something?
Yeah, I think it reflects on what both John and Craig said. So in our organization, we've got a number of networks. So we encourage people to kind of look at those networks, but we give those networks an element of power to kind of have discussions with our leadership and to talk about issues affecting their area. So we have a parents and carers network, we have a Black network, we have a LGBTQ network, and they have opportunities to come and speak, and they have lots of times where people can just come up and speak to them and go to the meetings. There's those. So, and I think that's all part of creating, I suppose, a culture of psychological safety as well. So you feel comfortable to have that conversation and say, well, I know this doesn't work for me. I'm sure it can't work for anyone else. Other people too. So why don't we have a conversation about it?
Yeah.
And also, I think it's an element of, and I've noticed this in the last probably 7-8 years. More of my colleagues, men colleagues, are talking about, you know, their kids, and I was up in the night, had to jump out of bed, go and grab them. One had a nightmare, or one was sick, and I don't remember that happening previously, kind of 7, 8, 10 years ago. And I think that really helps too, because you're beginning to normalize it. You're a parent and a man, and you've got responsibilities too. So I think you can confront some prejudice by just normalizing things, and us as kind of leaders, just as I've said before, mirror reflect what we want to see, and being almost, I wouldn't say championing it, but being examples of how we can do it.
Yeah. Well, and also, and I think, each one of us is in a leadership position of some role, right? We have power, we have authority, we have visibility, positionality, all the things. If we're paying attention to our team, our organization, or, whoever we're kind of responsible for, we're noticing who are the onlys, who's not getting opportunities, who's, even if they're small, right? And so we can go in and have, individual conversations with managers, with, junior level or underrepresented employees, and say, hey, I want to support you in, whatever the goals are of that person, right? So we can have those individual conversations, not just as fathers. I mean, yes, we're all fathers, but just as leaders, as humanists, right? So beautiful. I know we're about 4 minutes from wrap. I don't know if there are any questions coming in from from the delegates, from the audience, Apple or Dylan. I would assume if there were, they would be pasted into our chat here. I don't see any. So if they do come in, we'll try and answer those. But just wrap up, as this has been wonderful. All of your stories and perspectives and insights and have just been really powerful. I think this has been really a really good conversation. I hope that's true for everyone who's listening, who's watching. So as a wrap up, and maybe take 30 seconds to do this, if you can be concise. What is one reflection, one challenge, right, in a good way, one action that you want to leave delegates with? If you want to just wrap up with one kind of precise, concise little takeaway nugget that people would remember, what would you leave our delegates with? Carlos, I see you came off.
Okay.
You want to go first? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think I said it earlier, but I would say, humanize the conversations, normalize the conversations. I think if more and more everybody's doing it, and to John's point about our children, when they are in the workspace, the world will be a different situation. I totally believe is important. I have conversations recently with other colleagues that are parents in different stage, and I say, like, look, I'm facing a challenge right now, which is I became the taxi driver of my children during the weekend. Their social life, it's more crazy than mine. I need to take to the football and the practice and the birthday parties, and then and I was having that conversation, and someone was saying, like, oh, Carlos, you will miss it. Believe me, you will miss it one day. And I said, yeah, I know. To be honest, it's crazy to say, but I miss when my daughter was so small, and I was changing diapers, and and this kind of things. But that's true. But being able to talk about these things without any prejudice, without any guilt, without normalizing, I think it will help. It will help us moving in the right direction.
Love it, Carlos. Thank you. John, 30 seconds. What's a takeaway for our audience?
I think stories are really important, and role models are really important. We all have people that we influence, and I think by being deliberate about how we tell those stories and set that example, we can have an impact around those in our environment and then wider.
Love it. Craig, 30 seconds. Takeaway for our audience.
I'm going to go with think about how you define success. And is it just your job, or is it the job plus the family plus your partner, or whatever it is, and not just have it to be an antiquated view of I have a good title, I make a lot of money type thing, and social media has probably distorted that view. So yeah, think about what success means. Awesome. And last but not least, Sanjay, takeaway for our audience.
I think it's an element of what everyone just said now, but it's also I think there's an action upon yourself. Like if you have an employer who, let's say, isn't as flexible, start having that conversation, show them examples, just kind of say, well, other organizations similar to us, they're quite small, they can do this. Is there something that we can do? How can we help? So I think having that conversation and bringing out in the open, I think is something that everyone can do.
Yeah. Beautiful. Great way to wrap up. Thank you all. This has been a wonderful conversation. You're all awesome people, and hope I get to meet you in person. Maybe our kids hang out, hey, I wouldn't mind going to London for a week or so. Or Portugal actually too, Carlos. So thank you all. Thank you, Apple and Dylan for getting this all set up. And thank you everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.